I read your comment. Sorry I yell so loud at the beginning of my videos. It became a thing at some point. Anyways, yay! Converted man here. See, I said it, but I didn't yell it. But maybe I'll do it next time. Any rate, informal logic. The thing that I love and I want people to learn and understand. And so, well, why not teach it? Well, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to do a lesson plan, but what the hell? Let me give it a shot. That being said, this isn't going to be as good as other things, and maybe it will be. I don't know. It is what it is, and it's live, so I have no script. This is just, you know. Be sure to double check everything I say, and critique me, etc. Not this part. This part doesn't count. This is the preamble to me getting to the point. Let's start with, the start. Foundations. What is informal logic? And for briefity's sake, from now on, I will just be saying logic unless I need to be specific for some reason. Uh, Informal logic is an analysis of argumentations given in natural language. So, natural language is what we are speaking. Now, you and I are presumably speaking English. At least I'm speaking English. Maybe you know another language, but in order to understand me, you have to know English to some extent. And so when we exchange words, we're using natural language. It could be French, it could be Japanese, it could be any of the languages in the world. But it is a language that has been constructed over time and has evolved throughout time. And there are certain social constructs and agreements that we are making with each other. There are certain concepts in our heads that allow us to frame what words mean and what they are. There's certain ideas that we assume that the other person understands. Communication can break down, and when you're dealing with very technical things, you'll see it framed in very technical, weird terms that you're not familiar with. But at other times, you'll see it framed in terms that seem rather simple and mundane. It just depends what it is. But defining the word isn't necessarily a matter of just looking up a definition from a dictionary, because that dictionary might not match the individual that is delivering the meaning of that word to you. So, because that is the phenomenon that we experience in our language exchange, we have to be aware of the problems inherent in natural language. You have to extract what I am saying and analyze it and assume to some extent that you know what I mean by the words that I use. And vice versa, I have to do the same to you. And by and large, it seems to work. We get along relatively well. But there's misunderstandings, and those might be very trivial or they might be extreme. Informal logic aims to take a ordinary conversation and make it analytic so that it can be analyzed for logical errors. Once you've done that, then you can see what, if any, errors are present, and then correct the argument, and then take that analytical argument and turn it into a natural conversation, ideally. Usually that doesn't happen. What happens is you wind up stuck in the analytic realm because you've done all this work and you're done. You're like, I don't want to, get it back to, where it was. I'm happy now. I fixed the argument. So, what is an argument? That's a good question. You might think the word argument refers to two people yelling at each other, swearing at each other, going back and forth. And that is definitely a version of argument and actually falls into one of many categories of dialogue. And dialogue is another one of these bigger words that we use to mean speaking. So, types of dialogue. There's information exchange, there's information gathering, there's negotiation, there's erratic dialogue, and there's different types of dialogue. And so the sort of yelling at each other, that's erratic dialogue. That's where your method and your goals in each type of dialogue are formulated because of those dialogues. So in erratic dialogue, the goal is to reveal the deeper basis of conflict, even though the method for getting there doesn't really make that much sense. What tends to happen is you're using words to attempt to knock each other down. You're trying to insult them, they're trying to insult you, you're trying to make each other mad and hurt them emotionally. And so you'll never get to the goal using that method. And so that's why it's erratic. It's not a logical framework, but we do it, we engage in it, and so it is a type of dialogue. Typically, though, if we're looking at a argument in terms of what logic is talking about, it is where somebody is attempting to provide you with a reasoned discussion of why you should accept any given idea. So, why should I believe you? Well, here's why. And I give you a number of reasons. It might be a list, it might be a single reason, look, here's all the things that say the thing, here's all the thing, and there's certain cues that we humans can pick up on. So, you go to the car dealership, classic example, and how much miles does this car have? Well, the thing says 65,000 on it. Yeah, that's what the odometer says. Do you have paperwork that also confirms that? And then you go, well, how? Of course I do. You're like, wait a minute, why all the attitude? I mean, you should expect me to ask that sort of question. It's just like, of course, here it is, no problem. So it kind of makes us think maybe they're hiding something. When people get upset when we ask them questions, it suggests something to us, but we can't really pin down what that is. Okay, so when we in informal logic talk about argument, we're talking about the attempt to convince somebody that something is true. So what's the foundation of logic itself? Might be a very good question to explore. We observe reality and then we try to codify reality. We label it. We label aspects of reality. We label what we observe, and we make those into symbols that we call letters, and we use words with those letters. And so we have this synthetic version of reality. If I say car, you know what car is. But there's a trick that your brain is playing on you. And it's playing on me as well. There is no car. Not really. There's only what a car kind of is, which is this elaborate idea in your brain. But when you visualize it, or if you visualize it, or if you attempt to draw it, you don't draw a car. You will always draw a particular version of a car. This is what's known as a universal versus a particular. So there's the universal concept car, and then when you try to visualize car, it's a particular type of car that you have to visualize. You can't ever picture car. Another way to put this is triangle. So, well, that's a triangle. But that's a particular version of a triangle, and maybe you didn't think of that when I said triangle. But whatever you thought of had to follow certain rules to be a triangle. But the moment you picture triangle, you've pictured a particular type of triangle versus the universal notion of triangle. And this trying to encapsulate the reality that we live in symbolic terms leads us to natural language problems, which of course then we try to sort out by making it analytic. And sometimes we can, and sometimes maybe we can't, but we do our best, and that's the system, broadly speaking, of informal logic. So the ideas that we have that appear in logic are based on not just my observation or your observation, but all of our observations of how things are. And we name these principles laws, or sometimes I might refer to them as rules. So the basic laws of logic, and there's three of them. Law of identity, law of excluded middle, and the one I always forget that I have to look up. Law of non-contradiction. But yeah, the law of identity, law of excluded middle, and law of non-contradiction. What is this? A equals A, and what are we saying here? Well, all you're saying is that a thing is a thing. You're saying that the thing that you're talking about is that, and it's not ever not that. But that's very synthetic, because it doesn't really reflect the real world, and that's okay because we are abstracting the real world to gain these laws. So a crab is always a crab. Okay, but eventually a crab dies and turns into dust, and now it's not a crab. Well, true, but you don't call it crab anymore at that point. So there's many philosophical ideas that try to point out the problems of this ambiguity of language. So there's a heap of sand paradox. Imagine that you have a heap of sand and you remove 1 grain of sand. Do you still have a heap of sand? Yes. Okay, then you remove another grain of sand. And you do it again and again and again, because you're just, I don't know, you have nothing else better to do. At what point is it not a heap of sand anymore? There isn't really an answer to that, because heap is not defined. What makes something a heap is arbitrary. 1 grain of sand is enough to be a heap of sand. A similar phenomenon occurs if you say somebody is balding. What does it mean to be balding? Well, you're losing hair. Well, how much hair does one have to lose to be balding? And then you could say, well, when a person's bald, they have no hair. Although sometimes people that you call bald have hair. So are they balding or are they bald? They're partially bald, but they have some hair. So we don't really have a word for that. So we just say they're bald. Weird. But these are the building blocks of informal logic. The observations that we humans have drawn from reality, and we've codified them into symbolic ideas and written them down and say, these are the laws, these are the rules. That's how it is. A equals A doesn't equal not A, and A or B. There you go. Those are the laws, and we'll go from there. And you can spin your wheels, say, but why? Why? And you say, look, because they're axiomatic. What's that mean? It means they have to be true. Why? Because that's just how it is. 1 plus 1 is 2. Why? Because the plus sign is a thing that we decided on. But why is it this way instead of some other way? Because this is the way that it works. There is no deeper why to it. There is no purpose to the number 1. Well, there is, but there isn't. But, there's no like, what does it mean to, it's just like you get into these situations where if you ask why, you can't really answer it anymore. So you have to take what's called axiomatic truths into your brain and just accept them. And that seems kind of unskeptical, but you don't have a choice. So what is an axiom that you could pronounce and be satisfied with? One might be reality is real. And you might say, oh, well, that's kind of silly. You're not telling me anything new. But yes, whatever reality is actually real because the word real is in reality. So yeah, if it's a dream, that's not reality. If it's made up, that's not reality. If it's, fantasy, if it's mythology, that's not reality. So whatever the fundamental nature of reality is in fact reality. And maybe that's unknown and or unknowable, but whatever it is, if it's out there and it's real, then that's reality. So what about us? Where are we in that grand schema of things? Where do we fit in? How do I know that this is not just a dream of the Red King? You don't. And it doesn't matter because there's no reason to think that it is. Simply because something could be something doesn't mean that it is that thing. So this where comes in what's known as the burden of proof. And typically, broadly, that means not always, but a lot of the times, the burden is on a positive claim. And we'll get into more of that later, but these are just kind of foundation building blocks I'm trying to set out there. If I claim that this is all a dream, I have to prove that it's a dream. And if I don't have a way to show you that it's a dream, then you shouldn't believe that it is a dream. Now, it could be a dream, but you don't know. You don't know that it is, you don't know that it isn't, so there's no reason to think either way about it. And that's what I personally frame as being skeptical of an idea, which is separate to informal logic, because what the word skeptical is changes from person to person. But for me, it's to hold the idea in question. So it could be true, it could be false, you don't know, and you're not saying it's true, you're not saying it's false, you're just putting it up there in question and holding it until you have more information on it. So inside of this little treasure chest, you can hear something rattling around. So I could make a number of different claims of what's inside of it. Oops, I dropped what was it? One of the things inside of it. Now there's one less item in it. And now there's no items in it. And unless there's some trick or gimmick to it, which there isn't, we can, because I opened it, we can see there's nothing in it now. And then when I put the objects back in it, now they're back in it. How many are in there? It's the least one. You probably can't tell by sound that there's two. Let's just play around with that. Okay, now there's one object instead of two. I don't think you can tell the difference. I can't with my ears, but perhaps with sophisticated equipment of some sort, you could tell the difference between one and two objects being in there, but you wouldn't really be able to tell me what those objects are, other than certain things you could tell me that they have to be big enough to fit in here. They can't be too big because this is in the way. This is, by the way, designed to hold Switch games in here. So that's what it's for. I have another one over here that's actually holding Switch games. So I have two of these little friends. And this one's actually holding Switch games. And this one is not. So, but that's what it's designed for. But I'm not using it for that. I'm holding some other object in there. And there's no way that you're gonna ever guess what it is. There's just none. Because the object is just not, well, it's not one that you could ever guess. It just the likelihood of you guessing this, I don't even know what that would be. But I dare say you couldn't do it and so I have to tell you what it is. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, look, it's this. What the hell is that? Well, this is a plastic foot that attaches to a model of the golden condor from the Mysterious Cities of Gold. That condor is made out of mostly metal, but the feet here are plastic, and I keep the feet inside. There's two of them, and I keep them in there, and that's what's in there. But there's absolutely no way you could have guessed that. And the point is, you could tell me a lot about what isn't in the box. There is not a cow in the box, unless we're talking about a cow that's like a miniature model. But when we say cow, here we are again, where you're assuming that I'm saying cow in the same way that you would think that I would mean cow, which is moo, big old cow, like that's what a cow is, this living creature that's massive and would not fit in a box. That's what you assume I mean when I say cow. But if by cow I meant a little model that looks like a cow, is that really a cow? I kind of pulled the trick on you, right? Or if I say sheep, I have a stuffed sheep. And then I show you this, and it goes, what? That doesn't really look like a sheep. Well, I didn't tell you that it was a stuffed sheep from Minecraft that's blue, and so you might be taken aback. So this is the natural language phenomenon and all that. So this is the burden of proof is to demonstrate that something is, rather than just a possibility. It does us no good to say, well, inside of this is a dice. Well, it could be dice. It could very well be dice, because dice would fit rather nicely in there. In fact, I have a D6, and this would fit nicely inside of there. And, well, that could have been in there, but it wasn't. And now it is, but then I take it out. Now it's not. And, well, but even though the dice is something that could be in there, unless I give you a reason to think that there is a die in there, you should hold in doubt, or maybe not doubt isn't the right word, but hold in skeptical thinking that it could be a die. It might not be a die. I'm not sure. So I'm going to be skeptical one way or the other. Let me put that D6 back because I want to, and I like to have things where I like to have them. Okay, so if I made a claim that reality is all a dream, I have to prove that it is. It isn't enough to just say, well, it could be. Yes, it could be, but that doesn't matter. Is it? Are you making the claim that it is? Well, no, I'm making the claim that we couldn't tell the difference between it being real or a dream. Okay, sure. That's also a claim you need to prove, but I can go ahead and accept that without any proof that you offer, because it wouldn't matter. It doesn't. You don't have proof that it is, so it really doesn't matter. But you do need proof that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a real reality and a dream that seems real to me, because that is a claim you have made. So you've made additional claims that now need to be proven. Well, everything that I just said has to be proven. And how deep does that rabbit hole go? And that's where you get back to the axiomatic claims that must be true. And you have to say, look, that's it. That's as low as you can go. You can't go lower than that. These are true, and you just assert them and you go from there. And people like to play with that idea and say, well, then the thing that I really want to be true, I could just claim it's an axiomatic truth, and then it just is. Yeah, you can try to do that, but there's again a trick to this. So A equals A. Why? Well, because it has to. So I have $1 million as an axiomatic claim that must be true. But that doesn't fit, because there's nothing that says I have to have that amount of money. But how do I know that? And then you get into deeper stuff that I'll get into later on, truth tables, and how we decide how to analyze statements and things like this. But just, you'll have to kind of trust me here. Axiomatic claims or axiomatic truths are held separately to other things, and usually, and I think if I could be wrong, but I'm almost certain that they are always highly symbolic. That is, A equals A. So that's the law of identity. But what is A? Well, A is a variable. It could be B. I could say B is B. I could say C is C. It doesn't matter. I could say 1 is equal to 1. It doesn't matter what it is, because I could say car equals car. It doesn't really matter. I'm framing what the law of identity is. I could say captive desk equals captive desk. It doesn't. These are variables, and the variable could be some other thing. So a light is a light. A stuffed sheep is a stuffed sheep. That's just what it is. And so there's your foundation that you then build on. And there are philosophical musings about, well, you have to have a foundation for your foundation. But ultimately, even those musings rely on something that is the core foundation of everything else. And although I'd rather not get into it, I suppose we have to. God comes into the picture, so to speak. Now, on my channel, I talk about God a lot because I'm a skeptic, I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic, I'm atheist, and for whatever reason, the arguments for God all contain logical fallacies, as far as I've seen so far, and so I get to point those out and mock them, yell at them, and make fun of them, and people find that entertaining. And when I go insane and ranting and, I'd be silly and all this, people, I guess, find that entertaining. Otherwise, they wouldn't listen to me. And they're laughing along and they're nodding along, and maybe, hopefully, something in there gets a new idea going that they didn't have before. Or maybe they say something that gets a new idea in me going that I didn't have before. And we can increase our knowledge in that way. And ideally, the person making the argument will see that their argument sucks and fix their argument so that they have a better argument. But the weird thing is, when it comes to people promoting God, is they rarely, in fact, I don't know if they've ever, maybe one or two in my entire time of doing this, has ever actually changed their argument or admitted that their argument sucked. It's like super rare, at least from my perspective. Anyways, so yes, God could be a foundation, but then that reduces God to an axiomatic sort of thing. It makes it arbitrary. It makes it into a symbol. It makes it into a sort of math. It makes it into it makes it into a variable. So God equals God. Okay, sure, yeah, that's true. God allows for everything else to make sense. Okay, cool. But you didn't need God for everything else to make sense. But if you want to say that, fine. But now God is just that. It can't be more than that. You can't be an entity because of the nature of axiomatic claims. They're only synthetic, they are not grounded in anything other than an abstract object of the mind. And I know I'm saying words that maybe you are familiar with, maybe not, but I trust that you'll look into it deeper or ask me questions if you need to. Um, I don't know that I've done all the foundations of informal logic here in this video. And because I'm not scripted and because I'm kind of going here, there, and the other, where this may or may not be useful to you, I don't know. You'll have to tell me. But I think I've covered the foundations. So because I think that I'm done with the foundations, I need to conclude the video and ask for you for your feedback on whether or not that this was informative to you. Was there anything that I said that you didn't know before? Am I recovering things that you already knew? Do you have questions about anything that I said? Do you want clarifications of anything? And if possible, give me a timestamp of when I said it so I can go over it with you in the comments below. If you want to have a conversation about it, we can set that up live or offline. It doesn't matter. We can type it out to each other through email. My email is deconvertedman1, the number one, at gmail.com. Email me there if you want to do any of that, or just leave a comment. And if YouTube's comment section will behave itself, I might actually see it. But then again, who knows? Because YouTube's comments have gone wonky lately, so hopefully they fix that. So that's all I got for you for now. And these were the foundations of informal logic as presented by Deconverted Man. Thanks for watching. Until next time, informal logic. And after that, informal logic. That's not what I usually have said, but there you go.